Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Well, we have a really amazing guest this week, and I have to tell you something. I was thinking about it before I actually called her, yes, her, up, because I realized that I have interviewed, I think, as many women on this podcast as I have fingers, which is 10. And I am pretty sure that this is a reflection, as we've talked about on, I think, some prior podcasts I was mentioning about how women in blockchain, even though they're becoming more prevalent, it's obviously not as heavily weighted as the men who are out there. And so it is really nice to welcome on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk, Barbara Liau, who is the co-founder and COO of Nomad. So in the first instance, let's welcome Barbara. Barbara, welcome to Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited that you're here. Now, from doing a lot of reading and research about you, I picked you for a number of reasons. First of all, you have the same exact name as my mother. And
amazing.
It is amazing because she's a really intelligent woman. And I thought, and you being a self-taught developer, software developer, I thought to myself, I got to get this woman on here. And plus, I read about Nomad, and I thought this is going to be interesting to explore what they're doing and where they see themselves in the whole spectrum in blockchain and crypto. So I think what we should first do, because this is what our listeners love, they love to hear about who is coming on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk because they want to know that everything that you're saying from here on out is worthy of listening to. So let me just ask you this in the first instance. You are a self-taught software developer. I want to know, how do you self-teach something that is to many people kind of like learning Chinese? It would be like for me learning Chinese, where for some people learning Chinese, it would be insanely easy. Other people, like myself, I would probably try maybe a dozen times and then go, forget it. How did you do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think learning something new in general is, to me, it's one of my favorite things to do. I love learning things, just like new things, right? Like new experiences and new skills. And so, I was in my mid-20s, I would say.
No way.
It was after college. Yeah. So my formal background has nothing to do with STEM at all. It's, I actually have a bachelor's, a Bachelor of Arts in International Cultural Studies with an emphasis on communications and, conflict resolution. That's what I studied in school.
Oh my gosh.
So not really related, but also it is oddly enough, like incredibly useful in any case, right? Because humans are humans and there's conflict basically every day. So that has actually it's very, very useful. But the learning to code is something that I picked up in my mid-20s. I had graduated college basically in the middle end of the last Great Recession. And so there's not very many jobs available for people who are, doing essentially international relations at the time. And so I was just working whatever job that I could get. I was actually still in the military at the time. I had joined in college. And so I had that, but I was also looking for a career and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And one thing that I really liked about coding is that it's creative. And one thing that I wanted to be when I was younger was I actually wanted to be an artist when I was younger. In high school, I did a lot of fine arts, like drawing, painting, watercolor, that kind of stuff. But it's not really something that I had grown up thinking that was something you could have a career in. And so even though I had quite a few success and awards and everything. I never considered it as a career, but I love the creative aspect, and that was something that I think I looked for in jobs and careers. And that's one thing I found in coding. And really, I think what's great about coding is that you can learn it all on the internet, right? Everything is there. You don't even have to pay for it. But what I ended up doing was I just found, things online. I started off with, I think, Treehouse, Code Academy, to name a couple. There's, I think, Free Code Camp, and there's so much material out there that you can access. And then I had decided at that time that I was learning on my own is great. And I learned the basics, but I wanted to accelerate that learning. And so then I ended up looking, and decided to go to a coding boot camp. And so I went to one and did that. I think was it 12 weeks? I think it was 12 weeks, maybe 16. And then after that, I ended up staying on and being a mentor to the next class. And then was able to get a software engineering job right after that. Worked for a small startup building snow machines for ski resorts. And that was what the company did. But what I did was I designed and built the system to control the snow machines. So it was actually really cool, and a lot of things that is somewhat kind of useless but useful information. I ski, so I know a lot about snow making. But
that's incredible. Incredible.
It was a really good learning experience too, because I was the only. Actually, in hindsight, and at the time too, a lot of my friends were like, "You're crazy!" You're the only, I would be the first and only software engineer hire. I worked with a team of hardware consultants because they had to build the machine. But it was an incredible learning experience to learn just from start to finish, how do you architect, build, iterate, and deploy an application to production. And, but yeah, from there, I just wanted to learn and get better. And so I tried to keep up with everything, use new frameworks, tools, and then eventually ended up getting a crypto job shortly after. But that's kind of, I think your original question was, how did I get into coding? I think I just started. I know it sounds kind of dumb to say, but there's so many resources out there that you really can just start, right? And if you're not sure where, just pick one and try it. And that was one thing I gave to myself, because I do tend to, what I have come to term as, collect hobbies. I will oftentimes start something, learn it super intensely, spend a lot of time on it, and then at some point I get to some form of mastery and get bored. And so I wanted to make sure that coding wasn't one of them. And so I set a time frame for myself that I was I'm going to study this. I'm going to do it. And if I am still interested in it after this point, then I will pursue it. And so that's what I did. But it was really, I picked an online course and I just started doing them.
That's just crazy. You do know that, right? You do know that that's completely insane. Because you do know that that's not normal, and that's not something a lot of people can do. Yes, people can do that, but a lot of people, most people on this planet cannot do that. I think it's awesome to say, okay, I'm going to master this. Okay, I've mastered that. I'm moving on to the next thing. What was the first coding language that you learned?
JavaScript. Yeah, I love JavaScript. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I love it. I think it is one of the most approachable languages because you can start doing it right in your browser, and you can start learning it. I like that it's quirky. I think it's super fun, and it's really my favorite language to do to write in. But I am a hardcore I don't like semicolons, so I'm in that camp. If people ask, I don't like semicolons, so don't use them.
I got to ask you, though, you kind of glazed very quickly over two things. The first thing is, did you say you were in the military?
Oh, yes. This is a not secret.
The not secret. Is there someone we're trying not to tell because it's too late? So what branch were you in?
So I was in the Army. I was a 46 Quebec, which is a photojournalist. It's a public affairs specialist.
Wow. That's amazing.
I know most people don't even know that's a job in the military.
Well, the only reason I know that's a job in the military is because in World War I, my great well, one or two or maybe even three greats. My uncle was a photojournalist in World War One. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so I've got some pretty cool photos. So, so that's amazing. So you went and you did photojournalism in the in the Army.
In the Army, yeah.
And then you went, okay, I've mastered, it sounds like from what you're saying, and it sounds like you're incredibly modest as well. It sounds like you're a pretty awesome artist because you've won awards and you're very creative and you can do art. What made you think you couldn't have a career in art?
Yeah, so this is it's very kind of like maybe stereotypical. I don't know, but right. So my ethnic background, so I'm Chinese Filipino. And I think just a lot of that cultural expectations of what is considered a career and what is considered a hobby is very much something that I grew up with. And art, as far as I knew, only a select few actually make that as a career, right? So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing per se, but I didn't ever really think that I could make this into a career despite having the desire and like talent. I think maybe I think it'd be interesting to go back, and I'm sure there's like a parallel universe where I did that. And I'd love to see how that turned out. But I also like am a firm believer that you can live many lives, right? Just because Absolutely. You didn't do something today doesn't mean you can't do it later. And so I think three plans, multiple retirement plans, I guess, is my midlife crisis. I'm going to go to law school or study law. I think it would just be fun rather than buying expensive sports car. They'll basically cost the same. And then the other one is I would love to do something like build stuff with my hands kind of thing. I actually like in my previous house, I built like a chicken coop and that was really fun. And so I'd love to do something like that. And, I'm kind of connected with that. Like I would love to spend more time doing art and like creating,
making
in this world, tangible, like goods. Yeah.
That is totally amazing. So do I am I wrong if I sense an NFT line coming from you? And by the way, I'm not, we'll talk about NFTs when NFTs start rocking in the joint. Like, did you think, I want to get in on this one. I'm creative.
Okay. So like, to be honest, when they first came out, the first NFT that I was kind of really aware of was probably like CryptoKitties back in the day. Mm-hmm. And it was just so interesting to me. I love this concept, right? I think it's such an interesting concept of, I know people kind of reduce it down to like, oh, it's just a JPEG, but I think it's also like, but is it only just a JPEG? And even if it is just a JPEG, I still think that's still really cool, right? Just this concept of this and value is arbitrary. And so when people are like, oh, it doesn't have any value, I'm like, it does if people say it does, right? And if enough people say something has value, it will have value. That is, I think, the beautiful thing about just this concept, right, of why do people want things? And it's irrational. Humans are incredibly irrational. And so NFTs to me are such a fascinating thing because from a purely like technological view, when you look at it, you're like, wow, this doesn't make sense, right? Why this would necessarily be valuable or why people would want to do this. But you have to look at the human aspect, which is like humans love pretty things. We like pretty things. We don't necessarily care if things make sense. And that aspect, I think, is really the thing that's driving a lot of the NFT things. I think there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with them, to be honest. But I do buy NFTs. I've kind of slowed down. Basically, it goes in waves. When I'm shipping things at work and we have big projects, my NFT and other like extracurricular activities decrease. And then when things are a little bit more maintenance mode, I kind of like spend more time on it. I think I would love to I have all these crazy, I call them good, bad ideas, where with Nomad, for example, right? Like we're a cross-chain messaging protocol and I can get into like exactly how that works. But essentially what cross-chain allows you to do, right, is you can do calls and actions across different environments. And to have NFTs do this, I think would be fascinating to see, you could essentially like the NFT can morph and change across as you send it around, and you can generate some sort of pseudo randomness doing that, which I think would be very fascinating. In addition to just like if you were to build that, if the address changed, but what if the blockchain that it was on changed? And so I think there could be some really cool ones. So I don't currently have any NFTs that I've made, but it is a non-zero chance that I will do one in the future, I would say.
I love that. I love that. I have to tell you, and I'm just going to be, well, I mean, there's no way I can tell you anything but the truth, because it's heavily documented on a million podcasts, but in the beginning, I was very pro NFT, and then very quickly when I saw the amount of crap that was going on for sale, and I know that art is very arbitrary, it's very personal, it's very subjective, and I get all that, but I got to tell you something right now. I mean, some of the NFTs that people were making were just, to me, obviously a joke, and we told the story on one of the podcasts. It was the one after I did a recording called I Was Screwed on OpenSea, and it had to do with Ethereum because there was hidden gas prices on the auctions with no indication whatsoever that would be the case. I thought that payment would be done on whoever won, and it wasn't the case at all. This is a long time ago, okay? And no wonder OpenSea was making so much money because they were so busy screwing everybody. We also had the tale of a friend of someone we know. He said, I'm just going to show you how big of a joke this is. He literally made a stick figure, and I don't want to say any more about what the picture is, and it sold for like 15 ETH. So at the end of the day, I started to get very sour on NFTs. I love NFTs that are like, to me, what I consider like time well spent art kind of thing. But that is very, like I said, I know it's very subjective, and we won't go into that. What I want to go into now, though, is Nomad. Now, you've already established what Nomad is. Let's break down again what you said. So can you please state again what Nomad is?
Yep. So Nomad is a cross-chain communication protocol. Okay. And in particular...
Wait, stop right there.
We can stop right there, yeah.
Stop right there. So let's start with the cross-chain. Explain to everybody what you mean.
Sure. So cross-chain and other words that are used pretty interchangeably are like blockchain to blockchain, interoperability, cross-chain. These are all words that describe sending some message from one blockchain to another. And essentially what that means is that you don't have a centralized entity, facilitating that message for you. And so, for example, right now, right, like one example of like a centralized kind of message passing system would be like an exchange in many ways, where let's say, you have USDC and you would like to exchange it to ETH. You'd like to purchase Polygon. You can do that on a centralized exchange, but you need to like trust that third party. And so a trust minimized like way to pass stuff is where you have essentially in the same way that you trust a blockchain, and that is trust minimized. We want that same sort of trust minimization and decentralization in the message passing between blockchains as you do within a blockchain.
Continue then with the rest of the description.
Yep. So essentially cross-chain or blockchain to blockchain communication, like communication protocol. So essentially what Nomad allows developers, users to do is send messages from one blockchain to another. These can be any messages, arbitrary messages, generalized messages. That's kind of falls in the same bucket. Essentially, you can think of it as like sending mail from state to state or country to country, right? There is and the reason why we say like standard or protocol in this instance is that there is a specific way that you need to address the message. And as long as you follow that format and you bring it to, the post office, then your letter will get sent to wherever it needs to go. And so there is a standard way to send messages across chains. So you can go, for example, you can send a message from Ethereum to Moonbeam, for example, which is another blockchain. And you would be able to use Nomad to do that.
Okay. So let's talk about security just for a minute, because as we know, the way that you pass this information from blockchain to blockchain is with bridges, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, but many of these bridging tools have come under attack by hackers, and it's led to some pretty major losses. And some of the largest DeFi hacks have involved bridges. So do you see like a way where that could be minimized in the future?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point, right? And it's like anytime you open up a system to more, just more, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you increase variables, you increase the level of surface attacks, which makes sense then that, bridges have some of the highest, I think it's something like over $1 billion right now. Across multiple hacks. And so this is definitely something that we've considered very deeply and very carefully over the years. And so for some context, I've actually been working in cross-chain in some way or, interoperability for about four or 5 years now. That's what my first startup did is we focused on, at the time, Ethereum and Bitcoin were the two like blockchains we were focused on. And so myself and my co-founder, James Presswich, who's one of the, he's a very well-known like interoperability researcher. We've been able to like try a bunch of stuff basically and like see a lot of different ways that you can verify messages, right, and send them across. And so there's a lot of different ways to solve this problem. And essentially one thing that we've been very deliberate about is that we have to choose the trade-offs, right? Every time you build something, you have to give something up. You can never have everything. It's just like you can't have all the sleep, all the social life, and what's the other one? All the family time, right? Or something. It's always like a 2 of 3 or 4 or 5. You can't ever have everything. And so that's how we've designed Nomad is we're willing to make these trade-offs of we don't want to sacrifice too much security. We're willing to, we don't want it to be too expensive. But we are, and we want it to be able that you can deploy this on many chains, right? So that's often called extensibility. Mm-hmm. And we're willing to make the trade-off of latency. So we're willing to take we want additional security guarantees and extensibility, and this will it's going to take a little bit longer to send messages across different chains. And so security, it's really like, it's many layers, right? And that is something that we are very focused on. Hardening the security around not just the protocol, but also just operationally, right? Because a lot of times if you looked at some of these hacks, a lot of them were just regular security breaches that could happen to anybody. Mm-hmm. They're just bridges are just really big targets. And so there's multiple layers of security that have to be considered within, different bridging protocols.
Yeah, because we did do a podcast where we talked about Wormhole, where,
mm-hmm.
325 million was made off with after the hacker minted like 120,000 wrapped Ether, on the Solana blockchain without putting the equivalent on the Ethereum side. So, I think a lot of people right now, with crypto's having a rough time. We all know this. There's nothing new about that. Every single podcast, we kind of either touch upon that or we go on a deep dive. But, this is, I think, and I really want to get your opinion on this. This is one of the things, it's not just with DeFi, even though DeFi is, what many people would say in terms of the financial piece of the blockchain. It's the one that is probably going to be growing the most, even though it's still at infancy stages. It's the one where it's really, as a whole, getting people to really trust and understand exactly what blockchain can offer. And I think with not just the price obviously taking hit, but security is always on everyone's mind because there's only ever two headlines, in crypto and blockchain. The first one is hack, and then a huge amount of money, which is in the byline or even in the same headline. And then, of course, you have the volatility. So when when people are being then explaining blockchain, let's just say one of your dear friends calls you up, somebody who you knew from the army and says, listen, can you explain all this blockchain stuff to me? And, am I really going to get that same security if I go with, let's say, a multi-chain solution versus just, like Bitcoin, which is just on one chain and, it's very, very simple and singular. Do you have a way of explaining this to your friends and now we're all your friends. So do you have a way to kind of explain how, because something is multi-chain, it doesn't necessarily mean, or it doesn't, or it does necessarily mean it's going to be better in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's a multiple ends, which is blockchain in general, I think is a valuable piece of technology that, because it is still very much in its infancy, or maybe it's in its tween years now, I'm not sure, there's still a lot that needs to be done. I think what I found so fascinating is going back and looking in the archives of when people revealed the internet in general, right? They're like, this thing is never going to take off. It's just for scammers, or why would anyone ever use this? And in hindsight, we look back at that and it seems so obvious, right? It's well, obviously we would use this. But the similar questions pop up, right? Which is why would you ever put your information on the internet? Why would you ever put this in and trust some other party to host your information? Why would anyone want to see this? And I think these are similar questions that get asked about any new technology. I think blockchain in general, one thing that we're really in is everything moves in phases, right? There's within just any cycle, there is the application and infrastructure phase where I'm not sure if maybe readers have heard of this, but there's a great article, I think it's by UVU, put it out, but it talks about this app infrastructure phase where, take the airplane, for example. The airplane was invented and it's flying around. It's oh, hey, I would love to be able to land this plane somewhere. And so now that's the application. And then you start building runways. Then you're oh, sweet, we got these runways. Let's build more planes, bigger planes. And then you get this, you start building different types of planes. And then now it's oh, we don't have the infrastructure to support this. We need to build bigger runways. We need air traffic control and all these things. So you go back and forth where the actual use case informs the infrastructure that supports it. And so we're also in this phase in blockchain where we don't quite know all the use cases yet that, it's going to happen. As the infrastructure gets a little bit better, then the application usage changes as well. And each iteration, both of those things improve in some way. And so we're kind of in this phase right now where we're in the infrastructure phase. We had DeFi Summer, we had all these applications that really push the boundaries of chains, right? And that's really and I think I mentioned earlier, or maybe it was when I prep, but CryptoKitties, right? That was one of the first applications at Ethereum that was oh, Ethereum cannot just handle this one game, this one application. Mm-hmm. We need to somehow scale, right? And that was one of the catalyst markers, whatever you want to call it, that spurred the creation of many more blockchains, right? We did not have this many blockchains before, just several years ago. But the application demand forced that, right? It forced the industry to focus on infrastructure. And now we have many different kinds of blockchains that focus on different things, right? And again, it's trade-offs. Some blockchains optimize for speed, let's say. Some optimize for security. Some optimize for something else. Of course, you don't want to give all those up, but you're going to have to give something up at some point. Maybe it's just expensive to run. And so there's all these different types of blockchains. And then you get all different sorts of applications, which then change that. And so we've now had this demand for people want to go multi-chain. And the reason why is because as we get different blockchains is they each get increasingly more specialized, right? This is reflected in, you can just pick any example in the real world. What are we calling it? Beatverse. You can pick any example of this, right? Where once you know what you want to build and once you know your goal, you can optimize all the pieces, right? You're okay, I'm just going to get really good at making this one piece, and I'm only going to do that. I'm going to do it really well, and then I'm going to sell it to other people. And so it's just specialization. And we're seeing that now with blockchains. We're seeing the rise of like modular blockchains where maybe this blockchain only does, data availability. Maybe it only does executions rather than a monolithic blockchain like Ethereum where it does all of those things. And so if you have blockchains that are specialized, that means you need some way to connect them. It's a force that you can't really stop. People want that. Again, this is irrational, right? People want to explore. They want to be able to do more. And whether I really believe whether or not things are incredibly safe, people will still do things. And that's why we have hacks, right, of a lot of money, because people didn't do their due diligence or didn't know how to check the security of these different bridges. And so they didn't understand how to make those assumptions, right, and how to manage their risk. And so I think we still have a lot to do from the like builder side of like education. We need to have education around like, how do I evaluate this? And at some point, right, like the end user should not have to know that, in the same way that you don't know the security of some application that you use. You don't know how that's built. And we'll get to that point with applications built on blockchains. But that's really what it is, right? It's like, I've got a quote, Arjun, he's one of the founders of Connext. It's a partner that we work very closely with. And he said in one episode, I think it was on a Twitter space, or I actually think he might have a tweet, but he said that people are going to do this anyways. We might as well provide them with a safe option. And what we need is bridge condoms, essentially. Like,
I agree.
That's what we need, right?
Yeah.
And it's that same concept, right? People are going to do what they want to do. We can't teach abstinence. We need to teach, like, here's the safest way to do this. If you're going to do this, at least do it safely, right? And so that's really what Nomad is. It's, I think we're very open about it. It is not the safest solution theoretically, right? The safest way to have a bridge is essentially where you run the other blockchain's consensus mechanism on that chain. Essentially, it's just like whatever way that blockchain is verifying transactions, you need to do that exact same thing. But that's expensive, right? And that's one of the hardest things to overcome until you have just like a lot of activity. It's going to be incredibly expensive to do that. Mm-hmm. And so it's not realistic. And so Nomad, I'm going to use these fancy words, but it's an optimistic uses an optimistic mechanism. But what that essentially is we believe that this is one of the safest, most like usable options today. And we would love to move towards this like future where it is very, very safe. But until we can do that while reducing cost and making it affordable, like we believe this is the best solution for right now. Okay,
so let's just pretend for a minute. Let's just pack this away, the whole security thing, and let's just pretend that Nomad has now made such a world-famous, galaxy-known protocol, which is ironclad in security. So let's park that aside. User interface. Okay, let's just talk about adoption. So adoption, as you know, is, like you said, in its infancy. I even think you said in its tweens, and I think it's like I would even go with infancy. We'll go with that one, because the first couple of years we can't even talk about 2009 to 12, because people still didn't know what the hell. And I mean, people still don't know what the hell, but I mean, they really didn't know what the hell. So it's a very, very young kind of universe. And we all know that adoption relies on many things, not just the faith, the trust, but also user interface. User interface, it's regardless, it's just technology in general. If user interface is good, then you have better adoption. There's no better way to explain this than with phones, smartphones. So, crossing chains, you still need to have wallets on both chains to use a bridge. Isn't that correct? So don't you think that consumers, the people who are out there who are trying to learn how to use, I just saw Doctor Strange, by the way, so I really want to call it the multiverse. But when you have like this multi-chain solution, there's still this, if you can solve, I mean, I don't know if this is something actually, let me pose this in a question to you. Do you think that Nomad can dumb this down? And I mean this with the greatest respect to the human race. Do you think that Nomad can dumb this down enough so that, the end users can get past, this understanding of, basically so that they can gain some sophistication within the blockchain and technical space, because understanding wallets and how to use all this, and like I said in the very beginning, you need to have a wallet on both chains. So do you think that your user interface is going to grow to be something where people are like, yeah, Nomad is just so easy. I can be half asleep and half drunk and I can use it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great question, I think. And
I only have great questions.
It's a great question, of course. It's also an interesting question because I think there's many layers to this, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if all goes well, the end user, meaning, and by end user in this case, I just mean like somebody on the internet, right? They're not necessarily a developer. They're not necessarily like incredibly technical. They will not know that they are using Nomad. That is the end goal, right? The end goal is that the user interface gets abstracted such that people don't even think about it, right? The wallets know, the interface knows to switch back and forth between networks in the same way that, if you send an online payment between states, right? Let's say I'm, in California and I want to send a payment to New York. It just goes, right? I just send it. It attaches to somebody on my Venmo and like they receive that money. But I don't know what goes on underneath, right? Nomad, at the end of the day, it's the only people that should really know how it works is developers. In the same way that you don't know how a website works, probably. And I think it would be great. I would love it if people understood how, cross-chain stuff works. How to change networks and like how to like evaluate all these things. But I think that's not the end goal. And Nomad is, right, it's just a protocol. It's something that you build on top of in the same way that a developer builds, they integrate Stripe into their application or they build on top of AWS. It's a tool that developers can use to build applications. And what you can use Nomad to do, though, is that you can build more extensible applications. You're able to essentially unlock the benefits of different blockchains within one application. And it's true, right? Like currently right now, that user interface is not very intuitive. The nice thing is that with at least EVM compatible chains, so chains that run the same, I'm going to call it software, but they run the same virtual machine as Ethereum, so EVM compatible. You can use your same address on all these different networks. And so MetaMask, for example, you can just add a new network. And if you send funds from one blockchain to another, from your address on Ethereum to your address on, let's say, like Evmos, then you're able to just receive that and you don't have to switch wallets. So there are some, user experience improvements that have been made. But I think one thing that we need to do right now, because I think you're very much right, we are still very much in its infancy, is we need to like provide better materials for that. I also think like, for me, I think we still need to form the framework for people to think about cross-chain, right? Like people aren't quite thinking there yet in the same way that globalization, for example, right? Like people before, we didn't think like, oh, I want to build something, which means I need to source this from this piece from China or this piece from India, right? Or this piece from Canada. We don't think about those things, but right now we have to, which is why it seems incredibly difficult. And at some point, we're going to be able to abstract those down. There's going to be, market efficiencies where all that's going to kind of be taken care of, different services, and it will be, I have great hope that this will be a very easy, intuitive user experience for people, and they're able to take advantage of all the benefits that different blockchains have to offer.
Yeah, I love that answer, by the way. But I have to ask you something, which is a quasi-marketing question. I mean, don't you guys want to become, I know that you're saying that, well, end users shouldn't know it's Nomad, but don't you guys want to be known as like powered by Nomad as opposed to like powered by Ronin Bridge, which is exactly how the hackers took control of, Axie Infinity. You know what I mean? Because if there was like two choices, of a multi-chain, solution, and I could use either one, and one was like powered by Ronin, and the other one's like powered by Nomad, I'd be like, hell no, powered by Nomad, here we come. I mean, don't you think that we should do. Be like, so if that's the case, yeah. I mean, both said yeah. I think we're both listening to too much Beatles. What I will tell you is that, basically, if I saw that Nomad, because I never heard of Nomad, I guess it's kind of what you're saying, that you guys are flying by stealth, but wouldn't it make more sense, especially if, you guys are doing these amazing things, which you are, and especially because I just read that you guys had like 22 million raised in the seed fund round, so you guys are really off to a flying start. You obviously have people who believe in you enough. I mean, they obviously believe in you. They're putting their money where their mouth is. So with all these solutions, isn't it super important to like make sure that literally part of everything is powered by Nomad? Because I know that you say that you guys do that, but where are you guys doing that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great point, which is it's an interesting one where I definitely want people to know, yes, I want people to know like what Nomad is, and that it is a name and a brand that you can trust, right? Mm-hmm. Like whether you actually know what they do, I think honestly in the same way that like if you were to ask like, what does Google do? Or like, what does Apple do? It's almost like, I don't know, they do a lot of things, right? And
very true.
And you don't actually kind of, and same thing with Amazon, right? Like if you're like, oh yeah, what does Amazon do? They do a lot. And so yes, definitely like I would say brand awareness is something that is important to us. I think we've been approaching it in a slightly different way than some of our competitors. One thing to know is Nomad is relatively new. I think we've been around for maybe 9 months now. Wow. So, the time it takes to have a baby. So it's not very long, but it's also a really long time. I don't have kids, but I'm sure if you ask anyone who's been pregnant, you're like, 9 months is a freaking long time. Like, so it's both long and short, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a relatively new company. The tech and a lot of the people at the company, this is not a new subject for us. It's something that we've been thinking about for many, many years and working towards solutions. But it is something that we've been slower to do. I think for sure, like, and we much prefer what I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, we do really well in person. Like in person, people are like, you guys are so cool. I'm like, I know, thanks. Like, we don't have the video on, but like the glasses, I'm super into glasses. I love them. I think like they're incredibly underrated as an accessory.
I agree.
Like the ones that I'm wearing are these like they're a Japanese brand, and it's like black and gold, and they're like very coolly like made, asymmetrical. I'm
like you. I have like 40 pairs of glasses at this moment.
Oh, really? Oh my God. Okay. So we can talk about that later. I have a guy. I have several eye guys. But I live in Utah and my eye guy's in Brooklyn. And like, so I'm very
really?
committed.
Oh, well,
yeah, he's great.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, I love him. And so it's definitely something that like, we are focused on, but we're very, I would say, engineering heavy. I think as all like projects starting out should probably be if you're like a technical project.
Yep.
And so we only recently hired like our first marketing person. And so it's something that we're focusing on, right? And we've really been relying on partnerships and word of mouth and just people, I would say it's a little bit of like a quote unquote like crypto insider like secret of Nomad. And so people who have been in the space a lot or people who study this particular subject in crypto are aware of Nomad, but it just has not reached like retail yet. I would say like by the end of this year, you know, we definitely want to, we're really pushing that. I mean, that's one reason why we're doing, you know, things like podcasts and everything. And I'm super excited to be on this one. It's definitely like we're kind of in shipping mode, I would say, like trying to make sure that we're able to and like support applications building on top of Nomad, because I think that's something else is like, you know, Nomad is a protocol that's there for developers to build on top of. If you want to build, you know, secure cross-chain applications, you can build that on top of Nomad. We work very closely, I think I mentioned before, with Connext. They are a layer on top of us. And so we're very much like modular, so the modular blockchain. There's also modular interoperability. And Nomad is the bottom of that stack. Connext is another layer on top. And then you can build on top of that, right? And all of this is because it has to do with do your one thing and do it really well. But also like you can build better things when you partner with other really smart projects and people. And so I don't want to grow a huge company because I don't want to manage that many people. And one way that you can scale is to partner. My retirement plan, my other one is like, I am going to be, when I retire, I don't know when, I'm going to be a senior engineer. I'm going to have no reports. I'm just be like, just tell me what you want to build and I'll build it. They'll be like, oh, would you like to mentor or manage? I'm like, no, I'm done with that. I only want to build 9 to 5. That's my retirement.
Yeah, no one who's listening who has any clue what goes into managing a company will go, I love managing people. I think it's the greatest thing on the planet. Not one person who manages people will think that. I guarantee it. Okay, well, let's tell. Okay, so there's one other co-founder.
Yep. So there's 3 of us, 3 co-founders, myself, Pranay Mohan, who is our CEO, and James Prestwich, who's the CTO. And we actually started off with 8 founding team members. So 3 like co-founders and then 5 other founding team members.
But you all work remotely, right? You're just all based around the world.
That's correct. Yeah. So we're fully remote. We don't have an office, which I like. We're spread across the US and Europe. Primarily, you need to abide by the different jurisdictions where your exchange operates. And if you are some sort of business or service that, you know, you do transactions and you need to verify and do KYC, know your customer, right? You need to like verify who owns what address. You know, you're bound by these laws, right? You have to maintain them. But from a technological thing, right? Like if you are able to find some sort of system or you're already in one that is just crypto to crypto and you never off ramp and you are participating in a decentralized way, that is the whole kind of like idea, right? Which is it is not censorable. It is censorship resistant, meaning some government or some, you know, state actor or somebody can't stop you from using it. And that's really this kind of core thing. And I think it's very difficult to comprehend when you have a monetary system that works for the most part, right? Where you're not worried about not being able to use your currency and not being able to do financial transactions. But I think this really highlights the importance of having technologies like this that, you know, people will find a way. And I think that's kind of, I don't want to like say people should break the law per se, wherever you are, but it allows you to crypto allows you to continue to transact despite laws of where you are. And I think that's kind of cool, right? Like people should be able to make the choices that they want, right? And I think crypto gives people that freedom. And in many ways, that's why people who started off building blockchains, right? And like a lot of people earlier on when they did crypto, they're like, we're doing it because we want to be free, right? We want to have freedom to choose and want to have freedom to transact. And that is a lot of people that I know from several years ago, that's why they got into this, right? And so it's an interesting one. I think like in the same way that we want to build, provide people with a safe way to build cross-chain applications and conduct activity like multi-chain in a safe, secure way. That is the same way that, people want to be able to do that just in general. And so this is just, people are going to find a way. And I think it'll be very interesting to see this develop. I think you can't have it both ways. You can't forbid people to use it, but also want to use it as well. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch. I think it's unfortunate when there is a government ban on emerging technologies in general. I think, things need to be allowed to grow and flourish and develop.
Well, from your mouth to someone's ears, I think now all I have left to say is, Barbara, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Crypto and Blockchain Talk, the coolest podcast in the crypto and blockchain sphere.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure, and I am excited to now listen to many episodes of the podcast.
So I just want to thank you again for coming on. I am going to keep an eye on how you guys are doing. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Please remember to tell your friends and family that they too can download this beautiful podcast on one of over 70 different podcasting platforms. We have a pretty full list of all those podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Podbeam, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify. We have the full list on cryptoandblockchaintalk.com. Furthermore, these gorgeous podcasts are streamed onto our sister radio station, www.crypto24radio.com, playing news, music, and more 24/7 around the world. We really know that you are important as our listener. We know that more than anything. So you can communicate with us through any of our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But most importantly, you can email us directly. That's our preferred method of communication. Yes, the old email. And our email is education@savvydigital.com. That's education@savvy, SAVII digital.com. Again, we do know how important it is when you give us your time and energy and listen to our podcast. It means the world to us. So please be safe, take care, and goodbye for now.